We are tuned in to fitness and consciousness. Today's episode is called Coffee with the Rifleman. The Rifleman was a TV show from the late 50s. It ran from September of 1958 to April of 63. The main character is Lucas McCain. He's a widower raising his young son in late 1800s New Mexico. And he's like this kind of ultimate good man, but a man's man. He's morally righteous. Everyone in town knows that if he says something, then that's the way it is. He can be trusted. His word is impeccable, as they say. It cannot be pecked. And he has this custom Winchester rapid fire rifle. And so even though he's this really good, outstanding man and citizen, sometimes he has to kill some outlaws. And that custom Winchester can be faster than the fastest pistol shooters, right? And a lot of times they were dead before they cleared leather, as it goes sometimes. Say, when I was watching it, well, the first time I remember seeing it was probably around like 2005. And it was at my dad's place. So this would have been a show my dad saw when he was a kid. So my dad was born in 1950. And so he would have been 8 years old when this show came out, about the same age as the young boy in the show. And my dad had cancer, and I was at his place, and the Rifleman was on TV. My dad just had this little TV. It was maybe like a 12-inch screen, 13-inch screen or something like that. It just sat on his counter, and it was on. And it was never really a show that we watched together. I don't remember him even really mentioning it, or it was just on. And that was the first time I remember seeing it. Although maybe he watched it when I was a kid and I didn't notice. But today, and he died in 2005. So later on, I started watching The Rifleman and really like watching the show. I like the shows that have kind of like the more innocent kind of shows from like the 50s and 60s, and like some of them will have like these moral lessons. So the Rifleman, he's this moral guy, and when later like cartoons from like the 80s and 90s, I guess they would like watching He-Man and Superman, and like there were like these moral lessons, or like at the end of He-Man cartoons there would be some moral lesson explained. And they did the same thing with G.I. Joe. And even in like I don't know if it was like the 40s or something like that, there was a Superman TV show, 40s or 50s maybe, or a Superman radio show. I mean, I was getting into radio shows for a while there. A theater of the mind kind of things. And Superman back then, it was like 50s, 60s, whatever it was when this show was on, there was always a moral lesson along with it. So they would talk about, treating people fairly, even if they're of different races. And, they're trying to teach kids that we're all equal, and about doing the right thing and this kind of thing. I always like those kinds of shows. But today I'm watching The Rifleman, and I knew that I already had the name of this show picked out. I knew some of the stories I was going to tell. And I thought, okay, well, I'll come home and I'll watch the episodes, and happen to be on right after I get home. Sometimes I get off work at different times, but the show today was one of the really early ones, and it was the first time Lucas McCain met Micah. Micah would go on to be like the sheriff, but the first time he saw him, he's walking in. They live in North Fork, and the first time he sees Micah, he's walking up, and he stumbles out of the saloon, and he just falls onto the dirt road. And so Lucas goes up to, help him out. And the first thing that he does is offer him a cup of coffee. And I already knew that this episode was going to be called Coffee with the Rifleman. But the first thing he did when he met Micah was offer him a cup of coffee. And then he started learning about him, that he used to be a peace officer, and he used to be a really good one, and ended up getting, I think he got shot, and then so his arm was messed up. But Micah, who had this really bad drinking problem, they get inside the hotel, like where they would eat, and a restaurant in there, and it was with someone else is there also, and Micah asked them for a few dollars, and Lucas said, "I wouldn't give you a nickel so you can go get a drink, but I will offer you a job. Like, it's man's work. You're going to be outside. It's hot, hard work, but you have a job." And so he did that, and he seemed like, oh, it's man's work, because here's this guy Micah, who he knew was a good guy. Yeah, he has his problems. He's not what he used to be, and he's getting older. He can't be as good of a peace officer. So he offers him man's work, because then he can kind of start to get back his manhood. He can work hard and build himself back up and get rid of all the stuff that isn't serving him. But what a coincidence that the first thing that he did was offer him a cup of coffee. Now, the reason I was going to call this show Coffee with the Rifleman to begin with was because when I would watch The Rifleman, and a lot of times I was drinking a cup of coffee, and I thought it was pretty cool when I was drinking my coffee and the Rifleman was drinking a cup of coffee too. And so even though the show is 50-some, 60 years old, we're still drinking coffee at the same time. He's taking a drink of coffee and talking to someone, and I'm taking a drink of coffee. And we're taking, so even though it's 50 some years later, there's still that connection. Connection isn't just to the Rifleman, but that connection, I guess it's to my dad. I usually drink his this was my dad's mug. Um, if we were friends in high school, or you saw, and you came over to my place, you probably saw that mug on the counter. It was always out. But uh, where was I? Oh, so it was just like this connection to my dad, a show that he watched when he was a kid. There's the young boy in the show. I have a son. He'll be 18 in February. My daughter will be 21 in February. And in a way, it's a connection to all of that. And there's something about the coffee that, it's not just about the coffee. It is about the connections. When we're having coffee with friends, or we meet our friends at Starbucks, or meet some coffee shop that isn't Starbucks because Starbucks is too corporate or whatever. Sometimes we do that kind of thing, right? But even though, yes, I like coffee, coffee isn't just coffee. Coffee is this connection. So you're listening to this show right now. And for me, it's right now. For me, it is 10:25 on Friday, December 7th, 10:25 p.m. And for you, it's not. But it's still right now. And I'm drinking a cup of coffee. And I wonder if people will listen to the show, if they're drinking a cup of coffee also. I hope it's a show to drink coffee too. So this rifleman, he was really good with his rifle. He was as fast as can be. And my dad used to have this like 20 gauge shotgun, and I got to be pretty good with that. We'd shoot cans and pieces of paper. My dad lived out in this really small town for a while called Fairland, and it's out in the country, and you'd have to like drive up this steep, gravelly, dirty hill to get to his place, and there were like a couple duplexes and a house. And interesting enough, it just happened to be one of my buddies who I didn't even realize it for a while, but his dad lived in that house. And we played guitar together and stuff. But my dad would take me outside, and we'd shoot the shotgun, and got to be pretty good at that shotgun. And my dad would get me BB guns. And I got pretty good at these BB guns too. And I had this rifle, BB gun rifle. And a lot of times my dad, I don't remember how long he lived at that place, but a lot of times we'd go out camping a lot, sometimes every weekend for a long, long time. And sometimes it's because he didn't really have any other place to go. So just lived in the woods, and we go to Brown County State Park and in southern Indiana, and Hoosier National Forest and stuff. We go. There was a time we were at Brown County, and we were at the campsite, and I got pretty good at that rifle BB gun, and I was shooting yellow jackets. And I think people in different parts of the country call yellow jackets different things, but the yellow jackets are those really small bee-like wasp hornet things. I don't know what category they fall into exactly, but they when they sting you, they don't lose their stinger, and they can just keep pumping you full of their venom. It's called venom. They can keep pumping you full of that stuff, and they don't lose their stinger. But we had like this this little like blue blanket that we had that was real warm, because we'd be camping in the winter also. But this blue blanket, it was like hanging up on the line, and the it wasn't wintertime because there were these yellow jackets, but this blue blanket was hanging up, and they would kind of land on it, and I would take that BB gun and I would shoot the yellow jackets. I was pretty good at that BB gun. And time the forest ranger came. My dad saw him pulling up, and it's like, oh, no BB guns, huh? And so I had to put the BB gun away. But later on, those yellow jackets, they must have been plotting their revenge for a long time. I ended up getting attacked by a swarm of yellow jackets. It was at least three times that were quite unpleasant. And the first time we were with my daughter. She was maybe 8 years old at the time, something like that. And we were down in the woods. We were like pretty far from the car, pretty far into the woods, not on a trail. A lot of times we'd follow like the creek beds instead of being on a trail. We liked being away from people, and we just follow these creek beds. And we were walking, and my daughter she was a little ways behind us, and saw her kind of like look behind. She kind of like trips, and catches herself with her hands in the creek bed, dry creek bed. And she gets up, and I see her start to like wipe her arms, and then she starts screaming. So I ran back. It was maybe, I don't know how far away it was, 30, 40 feet or something like that. So I ran up to her, and she had a bunch of yellow jackets on her. She fell into a nest, and she was getting, so I was like trying to wipe all these yellow jackets off of her, and they're not even responding to me. They don't care. They are there to sting you, and that's it. They're not, even though I'm a lot bigger than them, they weren't afraid of me at all. And they were getting in her ponytail. They were just kind of like getting all over. So I was like wiping them off of her and picking them off. And I was starting to get stung like over and over and over again. And they just land on you, and they keep pumping and pumping. It feels like pumping just fire into you. Just keep pumping and pumping. And my dad's like, "What's wrong?" Because he was ahead of me a little bit before I ran back. And I said, "Bees." And I mean, they were yellow jackets, but it's so disorienting to be covered with these things. I said, "Bees," and he said, "Run." And so I picked her up under my arm and just took off running, picked her up like a football, and just ran. And we just happened to be in a part of the creek bed that was pretty clear, because a lot of times we're climbing over trees that fell. We're climbing over, I mean, there might be like really slick rocks with moss, and sometimes it's wet, sometimes we just happened to be in this spot where it was pretty clear. So I could just pick her up and took off running. And we ran for a while. My dad dropped his backpack. The yellow jackets got to him too. And they were getting in his backpack. He had like Gatorade and or something like that. So I think they were going towards like the sweet smell. So he dropped his backpack and we were running and running. And then we stopped. And, you know, it's so surreal. And, you know, I'm like checking her out and I'm like looking at my daughter really close because I don't know if she's allergic or not. You know, we are pretty deep in the woods. And even after all that running, we were still deep in the woods. I'm not sure how far we ran, but it was for, it's hard to estimate the time, but probably at least a few minutes. I'm not sure, but probably like a few minutes. And I'm like looking at her eyes really close. I'm trying to make sure she's not swelling up and seeing if she's allergic. So I'm thinking, well, if she's allergic, it's going to show up really soon. And then we're just kind of like doing this like self-check thing. And she got stung in about 8 places. How many times they pumped that poison into her, I don't know, but she got stung in about 8 places. My dad got stung in about 8 places. And I got stung in a hell of a lot more. I got stung probably at least like 30 some places. I had a tank top on and I had like these big welts. I mean, it looked like I was getting whipped with a whip. I mean, just big welts all over my back, and because they just keep pumping. They just land and they keep pumping and pumping, and you try to like wipe them off, and they don't even care. They'll sting whatever you're wiping them off with. But it was okay. But it was so disorienting. And if my dad didn't say run, I don't know that I would have even thought about it. I mean, I wasn't like getting ready to run right before he said it. I was thinking, okay, my daughter has a bunch of yellow jackets on her. I need to get these yellow jackets off of her. And so I'm taking all these stings, trying to make sure she's not getting stung. But if my dad didn't say run, well, I might still be there getting stung by those things. So the part of the moral of that story is if you're getting stung, the first thing you do is run. That's the first thing. You just run because I think they'll only protect their territory. I think what some of them, like some kinds of things that sting you will do is if you start to get into their territory, they'll just bump you. They'll give you a little warning. So if you're walking somewhere and you have some kind of bee, stinging, flying thing bumping into you, it means go the other way. But man, if he wasn't there, that could have been so much worse. Because even if you're not allergic, if there's enough of them, and there was enough of them, they can really mess you up. And I'm not trying to be over dramatic, but I think people die from that stuff. And I don't know how many stings it would take, but like maybe if my daughter took as many stings as I took, and I'm right there with her, I'm in the same place, and she started getting stung first. So it was just like this, really fortunate that they came to me instead, or mostly because they got her too. So start getting stung, and run. There was a song my dad. Oh, wrong one. My dad played guitar and sing. He sounded like Elvis, not because he was like trying to impersonate Elvis, but he just sounded a lot like Elvis. And he recorded a bunch of stuff, and like one of the regrets that I have is not playing with him more. I mean, we pass the guitar back and forth sometimes, but didn't really sing together. Um, but luckily, he recorded a bunch of songs, a few CDs worth, bunch of songs before he died. And so even like when we were getting stoned, I would finish this part of the thinking was he had already had like some of his lymph nodes taken out because he had cancer. So when we were in the woods, he was already uh, going through some like surgeries and stuff and treatments. And so he got stung 8 times, but it was still kind of a big deal. It wasn't good, but he ended up being all right. I don't think it didn't. Well, as all right as it goes when you're. Anyways, uh, there's this cool song that he played, and I never heard it before. I never heard it before I heard him record it, and so I had to find out who wrote it. It was written by Craig Morgan, country music guy, and Carrie Kurt Phillips. But I heard my dad play this song on the recording, and I thought it was pretty cool. A lot of times I liked my dad's version better. I'd hear him play something, and I didn't know who was the original singer or writer, and then I'd look it up. I was like, my dad does it better than that. Even like some of the Elvis songs and stuff, he made them like cooler. This one's called Almost Home. Craig Morgan. He had plastic bags wrapped around his shoes. He was covered with the evening news. Had a pair of old wool socks on his hands. The bank sign was flashing 5 below. It was freezing rain and spitting snow. He was curled up behind some garbage cans. I was afraid that he was dead. I gave him a gentle shake. When he opened his eyes, I said, "Old man, are you okay?" He said, "I just climbed out of a cottonwood tree. I was running from some honeybees, drip drying in the summer breeze after jumping into Calico Creek. I was walking down an old dirt road, past a field of hay that had just been mowed. Man, I wish you'd just left me alone, 'cause I was almost home." Then he said, "I was coming around the barn about the time he grabbed my arm when I heard Mama holler, 'Son, hurry up.' I was close enough for my own nose to smell fresh cobbler on the stove. When I saw Daddy loading up the truck, cane poles on the tailgate, bobbers blowing in the wind. Since July of '55, that's as close as I've been." He said, "I just climbed out of a cottonwood tree. I was running from some honeybees, drip drying in the summer breeze after jumping into Calico Creek. I was walking down an old dirt road past a field of hay that had just been mowed. Man, I wish you'd just left me alone, 'cause I was almost home. I said, 'Old man, you're going to freeze to death. Let me drive you to a mission.' He said, 'Boy, if you left me alone, right now I'd be fishing.' He said, 'I just climbed out of a cottonwood tree. I was running from some honeybees. After drip drying in the summer breeze, after jumping into Calico Creek, I was walking down an old dirt road past a field of hay that had just been mowed. Man, I wish you'd just left me alone, 'cause I was almost home. Man, I wish you just left me alone, 'cause I was almost home.'" It's a pretty cool song. So when I have the coffee and it's connecting to all of that. So right now my coffee is sitting on top of this old coaster. I'm pretty sure my mom and dad had those when they were married, and some of them were used like under this table that I'm on. This table, this kitchen table was my, it's this round kitchen table that was my grandma's, my dad's mom. She died when my mom was pregnant. I think this table is over 100 years old. But those coasters, they put them underneath the legs of the table so it wouldn't scratch up the floor. But so I use it as a coaster. I have a few of them, these old coasters that are, I think, as old as me, at least somewhere around in there. 30-some-year-old coaster. And when so if you're having a cup of coffee now, or you're having a cup of tea, or you're, I guess, even just listening, and whether you're just like listening to this show, or you're watching the show that you used to watch with your parents, your mom or your dad or your kids, and maybe like that, this time is like past, but it's still here because right now it's right now. So for me right now, it's December 7th, 2018. Maybe for you, it's January, February. Maybe it's next December, but it's still right now. And when we reflect, what is it that's reflecting? We have with us this, carrying the DNA of all of our, we're carrying all of our ancestors with us. We have that. It's in our DNA. It's quite scientific. It's not just like some kind of like woo woo. We have all that in us, and there's something about connecting. Whether it's that cup of coffee. Alcohol is a common thing where people will get together and they drink beer, and lots of the times they open up and then they start talking about stuff that they wouldn't have talked about if they didn't have that beer, or maybe they're talking about things they wouldn't talk about if they didn't have that coffee. And when we're connecting that, it's like when you drive by like your old neighborhood where you grew up, and I think we can see, I've seen a couple times like more like literal than just like thinking and like feeling, but like seeing energetic imprints. I did a show on energetic imprints, but like what is that when we're driving by the house where we grew up, and like there's my dad's place. I haven't been by that old place in Fairland for a long time, but it hasn't been that long since I went by where my dad lived in Greenfield. There was a lot of cool stuff that happened there. I met a lot of cool friends in Greenfield, and we had a lot of fun times in that place. So when I drive by there, and I don't get there as much as I used to because my daughter doesn't live in Greenfield anymore. So I don't get there, drive by like I was. When I drive by, I can still just like these memories start popping up. Where did that come from? Like, where was that stored? And I remember all my friends coming over, and my room would be packed full of really cool people. And we were, listening to awesome music, Pink Floyd and Grateful Dead, and all kinds of good stuff, and doing what teenagers do. And when I drive by, like the house that was my mom's, well, my mom and dad lived there. They got divorced when I was like 7, I think. And I drive by that house. A lot of stuff looks different. I drive by, and that tree I used to climb in the front yard's gone. I spent a lot of time climbing up in that tree, and I still like to spend time up in trees. But that tree's gone now. That house is still there, and then so I drove by it. It's been a while, maybe about a year ago or something. I'm not sure exactly, but I drove by my old street, Howard Street in Shelbyville, and I could see. And I drove with this. The block we had, it was like round. It was kind of like a circle. And my grade school was really close to there, Loper School. And I drove around the block, and I was like, oh, that was where my friend Brandy lived. And then my friend Jeremy, I hadn't thought of him in years, but just driving by that house, like, oh, yeah, we'd get together and playing like G.I. Joe guys and stuff. And then it's like, oh, there's like Deidre's house, and then oh, there's Steve's house, and then drove by Jonathan's house, and then there's, what was that kid's name? Can't even remember that kid's name, but I remember living there. And that's where Jennifer lived, and that's where Aaron lived, and there's what is that? Like, why is that such a big deal? Like, why does it feel like that? So I guess when we're, having the cup of coffee, to me, it's like, it's connecting with all of that. When we're just like sitting, maybe we're by ourselves watching a TV show, and our the character that we like is, they're drinking a cup of coffee too. And it's just a connection to all of that. And the Rifleman, he was often, he would take in these strangers. So he just met, when I was talking about at the beginning of the show, and he had just met Micah, the guy that would become the sheriff, was a peace officer, and then kind of fell into a rut. He offered him a place to stay and a job, and brought him into his home. He preferred sleeping out in the garage, or out in the barn. This broken old man. But Lucas didn't just want to give him a handout. Oh, I'm this nice charitable guy. I'll give you some money. I'll help you out because I'm this good guy. I'll give you a job. It's a hard job, a man's job. So you'll do the job, you'll feel like a man, and you'll make man's money. That's what you need. You don't need a handout. You don't need a few bucks for some whiskey. You need a man's job. And here it is. And sometimes, I was watching the show yesterday, and Michael Landon, young Michael Landon, was on, and Michael Landon was he was riding with some outlaws, and so this is kind of a recurring theme in the show. Also, is there's the guys that are just they get into the wrong crowd. That they're just riding with the wrong guys. Maybe it's their brother, maybe it's their dad, maybe it's somebody's an outlaw, and they just kind of get into the wrong scene, doing things they don't want to do. They're robbing banks, and they're robbing people. They're stealing their horses, or they're doing this stuff. And so the character played by Michael Landon, so Lucas's son was out somewhere. He'd go off by himself. See, he's raising his son to be self-sufficient. He knows how to track. He can ride a horse. He's quite a self-sufficient young man. And but he was out, and he got hurt. I came in, I started watching. I'm not sure how he got hurt, but the character of Michael Landon saved his life. And during that, Michael's character broke his leg. He fell and broke his leg. And so Mark, the rifleman's son, took them back to the ranch, and Lucas comes out. He sees what's going on. He can see that he has a broken leg, so he's helping him inside. But he can also see that the other riders, they weren't nice guys. But he could see that the character Michael Landon was playing was a good guy, and just falling in with these outlaws. And it's pretty easy to tell. But he didn't say anything about that. He's like, let's get him inside. Let's help him out. And the rifleman offers him a drink of whiskey because he's about to reset his broken leg. And he refused it. And so you see him set his leg back, and he lets him stay at his house. So just met the guy. Sure, you can stay here. And then he starts helping out and gives him a job. And then the outlaws, they ride off, and they're going to come back when he can ride again. But he sees that he doesn't want to, and kind of a recurring theme on the show is, so when character played by Michael Landon comes back, or when his brother comes back, and the other riders, the other outlaws, he tells him he doesn't want to go. He's not going to be riding with them anymore. And ends up being a fight. He ends up shooting him. So the character played by Michael, it's kind of hard to tell who's shooting who, because the rifleman shoots a couple of them also. But he had to kill him. Otherwise, he would have been killed. So there's a lot of metaphor in that, and there's, maybe these are literal things that happened over time. People are trying to get away from the people that they're riding with. They don't want to ride with them anymore. They're a good person, and they just don't want to. They don't want to be an outlaw anymore. They want to go straight. And so we have to kill those outlaws. And it's not, maybe not literally, like in this day and time, a lot of us end up riding with some outlaws, and but we want to go straight. So we have to distance ourselves from that, kind of, maybe like kind of kill them in our mind. It might be a little bit extreme. Sometimes it's hard to get away from those outlaw ways, right? Uh, the Here's another song. It was written by Bob Dylan. It's called "One More Cup of Coffee." I really like that. I like Bob Dylan, but Robert Plant does a cool version of this also. "One More Cup of Coffee," Bob Dylan. Your breath is sweet. Your eyes are like two jewels in the sky. Your back is straight. Your hair is smooth on the pillow where you lie. But I don't sense affection, no gratitude or love. Your loyalty is not to me, but to the stars above. One more cup of coffee for the road. One more cup of coffee before I go to the valley below. Your daddy, he's an outlaw and a wanderer by trade. He'll teach you how to pick and choose and how to throw the blade. He oversees his kingdom, so no stranger does intrude. His voice, it trembles as he calls out for another plate of food. One more cup of coffee for the road. One more cup of coffee before I go to the valley below. Your sister sees the future like your mama and yourself. You've never learned to read or write. There's no books upon your shelf. And your pleasure knows no limits. Your voice is like a meadowlark, but your heart is like an ocean, mysterious and dark. One more cup of coffee for the road. One more cup of coffee before I go to the valley below. There was a episode of The Rifleman. I've been doing jiu-jitsu since I was 18, since 1997. And I started, my dad's actually the one that told me I should learn. I was practicing martial arts with buddies before then. And my dad said I should learn jiu-jitsu because of Hoist Gracie. And so I founded jiu-jitsu school as a traditional Japanese school. I don't think there was any Brazilian jiu-jitsu around here at the time, and I didn't even know the difference at that point. To me, jiu-jitsu was a Japanese thing, but because I didn't understand Hoist Gracie at that time, my dad told me about him. But on the show, so the Rifleman was set in late 1800s New Mexico, and there was this couple Japanese guys that came. And they're coming on the train, and they get into North Fork, and that's the town where it's at. And Lucas and his son, they're like helping them do something. It's been a while since I've seen this episode, but it turns out that this guy is like somewhat like of a samurai descent or something like that. But he has a sword, and I think my computer might be trying to restart on me, even though I keep saying to do a different time. I'm going to start to wrap this up. But anyways, So the Japanese guys, they come into town, and they're very polite, but they come in, there's like these dusty old Western dudes, and they there's like some, I guess, just flat out racism. Somebody's different coming in, and I never seen a Japanese person before. Late 1800s New Mexico, and so the Japanese guy has a sword, and it seems like that the Rifleman can understand that the Japanese guy's sword means something very similar to what the rifle means to him. You become one with it. You carry it with you everywhere you go. You hope you don't have to use it, and you're a really, really nice guy, but sometimes you got to kill somebody. It's just the way it is. That's just the way it is. And so it's going to be like a fight that breaks out, and the Japanese guys, I think he has to do it because like for honor, like enough is enough kind of a thing. We're going to have this fight. He's not as big as these other guys, but he's like, I'll fight these guys anyway. It'll be fine. And he's going to like, I think at first it's like, I could be wrong because it's been a while since I've seen this. So I think he's going to fight the gun with the sword, and the Rifleman's like, how about just you guys do a fist fight because you can't fight. You don't bring a sword to a gunfight, right? So they agree to just a fist fight, just a fight. And Lucas is going to help him out. And you see the Japanese guy, he's doing all kinds of throws. I think he kept doing a shoulder throw. I think it was mainly doing a shoulder throw, Seonagi, over and over again. And so the Rifleman can see that this guy is different, and gains even more respect. And then like one of the last parts of that episode is the Japanese guy is going to teach Mark, the Rifleman's young son, jiu-jitsu. So late 1800s, New Mexico. So that would be Mark. I mean, the show is from the late 50s, early 60s, but even then, how many people here are doing jiu-jitsu? Not very many. But I thought that was a really cool part of it, that the Rifleman wants his son to learn, because clearly it's effective and it's neat. But the Rifleman was teaching him not, because he was one of the only ones that wasn't like racist, or it was like not quite racism, but there was, I guess that's kind of the easiest way to explain it. But I'm gonna go ahead and wrap it up now. And there was like this one quote that I kind of liked, somewhat out of order on here, but after Mark said to his dad, he's like, "You hit him pretty hard, Pa." He said, "Well, he was pretty big, son." I'll leave it there. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.